But we're back in the game, luckily. Hooray. My rambling story ended up taking the whole time that it took to get back in the game. So let's get to pack opening. Start with the 9 packs of foundations. So packs in Arena have less cards in. So normally in a pack of Magic the Gathering, you would get the land slot, which most of the time, 99% of the time, will be a basic land. In some sets, or in quite a lot of sets now actually, most sets seem to now have a non-basic land type that will be like multicolour, help you cast multicoloured spells in the format, with some kind of extra ability, like gaining a life. These are quite nice default ones. They were printed in Khans of Tarkir alongside the fetch lands that are rare lands. But then you'll get a collection of commons, which in these packs appear to be 4. We've got a nice variety of commons here. Take Your Own Death, Bushwhack, Big Fin Bouncer, and another Banishing Light, which is alright, 1 enchantment, but not one we can use in the Commander deck, in the Brawl deck, because we already got a Banishing Light in our Jumpstart deck, as far as I'm aware. You then get a few uncommons, which in this case is Arcane Epiphany, which is draw 3 cards. It costs 1 less if you have a wizard. And a wizard! The Micromancer, who tutors for a 1-drop, 1 mana value card. Sorcery or instant specifically. So could tutor for a Bushwhack, but couldn't tutor for a Fake Your Own Death because it's 2 mana value. And then you get the rare slot. In this case, we get an Anthem of Champions, which is a white and a green for an enchantment. Creatures you control get +1/+1. Quite nice. Nice little anthem. We'll then continue to the next pack. But yeah, normally in... I just got my uncommon wild card for finishing my first layer of the vault, the basic vault. But yeah, normally you'd get a land slot, you'd get a token, you'd have, I think it's 7 basic, 7 commons, 3 uncommons, and then a rare or mythic slot. I think that's what a regular pack is. It's been a while since I've opened a real pack in real life, other than the pre-release. And I don't really count the number of cards in each pack. I think it's 15 cards, I think. But they might have dropped it when they made play boosters. Either way, you get a rare or mythic, a little amount of uncommons, a bunch of commons, and then a land and a token. But in this case, you don't need tokens because the game generates tokens for you whenever you've got a card that makes tokens, like this instant. Whenever this creature enters, it makes a 4/4 dragon, and there's the dragon token. So because you've got this card, you automatically have a dragon token. Similar to this, it makes 2 fairies, and there's the fairy token. And there is a Tali Primal Storm. A legendary creature, Elder Dinosaur. For 4 red, you get a 6 power, 6 toughness. Legendary creature, Elder Dinosaur. When a Tali Primal Storm, in brackets, attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. Then you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana costs. So this is a deck that wants to be big red spells. Because then when you attack with this Atali, you get the big red spell off the top of your deck for free. Say this 5-drop Dragon Trainer, who is a 1/1 with a 4/4 attached, for no mana. But you also get your opponent's top card, which in the Commander format, where you have, like, most games you will play 4-player, so you will have 3 opponents. Atali then goes, I take my top card, and your top card, and your top card, and your top card. All for free, if I want to cast them. So it's a very good card. In Brawl, I'm not sure it will be as good, but building big red might be an option. Still no new enchantments. Next pack, we've got a Seraph. Whenever you gain life, you get to surveil 1. Could be useful if we end up playing the Nyx Fleece Ram. My voice is starting to go now. Ah, uh, uh. We got an Evolving Wilds, which is pretty nice. Mana fixing is always good in a format where you need it. So if we build a multicolour Brawl deck or a multicoloured standard deck, an Evolving Wilds is useful for fixing our colours that we need. Much like the Thriving Heath that I played in the Jumpstart game. And then we've got a creature that cares about modified. So if I build the Kodama of the East Tree deck, that'll be useful. Kodama of the West Tree? I can't remember which one's which. One of them's really good in Commander. The other one is pretty good in Commander. But one we opened and one we didn't because it doesn't exist in Arena. Our rare slot is Lunar Insight. A kind of meh card. For 3 mana, you draw a card for each different mana value among non-land permanents you control. It's alright. 3 mana, draw maybe 3 or 4 cards. When this is a 4 mana, draw 3 cards. Worthy of a rare slot. We also got a wizard who cares about drawing your second card. So, some nice little stuff. This is what I mean. Foundation doesn't have anything like stupidly super broken. Ooh, we don't have a land in this pack. Instead, we have a common wild card by the looks of it, which is quite nice. We got another aura, but it's in blue, so unfortunate. And we got another Serra Angel with the old Serra. Oh, I was about to say the old Serra Angel artwork. This is not the original Serra Angel artwork. This is the core set Serra Angel artwork. I think she ran this artwork for several core sets. And Sphinx of Forgotten Lore. For 2 blue, you get a 3/3 creature Sphinx, which has flash, so you can play it at instant speed, flying, so it can only be blocked by creatures with flying and reach, and whenever it attacks, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback, which I mentioned before. Somehow this card, while having a lot of new terms, I have talked about all of them previously. Flashback means you can cast the instant or sorcery from your graveyard by paying its mana cost, as it explains there in the little rules drop downs that you can see sort of above my head, not quite. Next pack, we've got Dismal Backwater, fixing land, quite nice. A few more new spells: Uncharted Voyage, Shore Strike, Brineborn Cutthroat, who cares about casting spells at instant speed. Strict Lookout, a nice little flying vigilant owl. Look at his glasses. He's got goggles for flying and a little cap. Quick Draw Katana, pretty decent. Well, not a very good equipment, but it is a common, so it's like, what do you expect? Vampire Gourmand, sacrifices creatures to draw cards. And a rare wild card. Nice. Next, we've got Thornwood Falls. Oh, a common and uncommon wild card. A bunch of cards we've already got. A Seismic Rupture, which was the spell that Nicol Bolas double cast in the tutorial to deal 4 damage to all of our non-flying creatures. And an Alesha who laughs at fate. Alesha is a great character. Just from Khans of Tarkir, they are amazing. So for 1, a black and a red, they are a 2 power, 2 toughness, legendary creature, human warrior. She has first strike, and whenever she attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on her. It says on it, which I kind of am poo about. Foof, annoying, but I guess it means it as the card, as a physical object in the game, not the character's name. She also has the ability Raid, which is a flavor ability word. So there's a difference between ability words like Flashback, which have mechanical ties, like they have a rule built to them. So like First Strike. First Strike, whenever written on a card, doesn't need explaining. It is literally this creature deals damage in the first strike step of combat, which comes before the regular damage step. Raid is a flavor text ability, so that the raid word ties to a variety of different abilities that all care about if you've attacked this turn. So some raid abilities will be like at the beginning of your end step. Like this one. It says at the beginning of your end step, if you attacked this turn, the raid section, return target creature card with mana value less than or equal to a Lesher's power from your graveyard to the battlefield. So she attacks, becomes a 3/3, and then returns a 3 mana value or less from your graveyard to the battlefield at the end of your turn, if she survives. She also has first strike, so she is pretty decent at surviving. But as she attacks more, the bigger thing you can revive. So I would be tempted to chuck her like an Atali in this deck and be like, yep, she attacks, brings back an Atali. Then next turn, her and Atali both attack. Cast a bunch of free things, brings back more stuff. So going back a little bit to Raid, Raid also triggers on like at the end of combat on your turn. If you attacked with a creature, thing happens. There are also some creatures that have raid abilities that are like, when this creature enters, if you attacked, thing happens. So this is where it's like, unlike First Strike, which is this thing happens, raid is more of a, as long as you fit the criteria, that's how these abilities work. And raid's criteria is if you attacked this turn, which is nice and simple. Next pack, we've got Thornwood Falls and a Jungle Hollow. Double land pack, not great. We've got a fishing pole, which is an equipment that makes fish by putting bait counters. Another banishing light, not very useful. An elf that cares about elves. An aura in black, an enchantment in black that has raid again. At the beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, create a food token. Hungry Ghoul that sacrifices creatures to get bigger. And Kaikar, Zephyr Awakener. So for 2 white and a blue, there are a 3/4 legendary creature bird wizard. They have flying, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, choose one. And then you have 2 options. The first option is exile another target creature you control, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step, or create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. So they are an Azorius deck that wants to cast a bunch of non-creature spells, like enchantments, or artifacts, or instants and sorceries. And you can just flood the board with 1/1 spirits, or if you cast an instant, you can flicker your own creatures to protect them from stuff, and then they return at the beginning of the end step. So if someone's about to board wipe, you can be like, I cast a bunch of instants, exile all my creatures until the end step, your board wipe goes off, kills all your creatures, then mine all come back. And there's the spirit token as well, drawn by Ryan Yee. Very nice spirit token. An Innistrad one, I believe. Next foundation pack. We've got a Blossoming Sands as the land. A classic Savannah Lions. A common wildcard. A good boar. A couple of pirates. A Pilfer Sorcery that makes your opponent discard a card. And Electro Duplicate. This one is a new card for foundations. Pretty cool. For 2 and a red, it is a sorcery, so you can only cast it on your own turn. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it has haste, which means it can then attack straight away. And at the beginning of your end step, you sacrifice it. But then it also has flashback, so you can do it another time from your graveyard for 2 red. Quite a cool card. Next pack, Wildscar Crag, a cat that makes a cat, more pirate, an elk that helps you fix mana, which is quite nice, 2 face down cards, which I think means it's a double rare pack. Another Brineborn Cutthroat for the flash deck. Start with this one. Hooray! Homunculus Horde. I do like homunculuses as well. They're more funny little guys. So Homunculus Horde is 3 in a blue. For if you get a single card in Arena, do you have 4 copies of it? No. So when you open a single card in Arena, you get 1 copy of it. If you get 4 copies of the card, every other copy you get of that card, I believe, can just be turned into... I don't know if it gets turned straight into wild cards of that type, or whether it just gets turned into points to go towards wild cards of that type. So like, I've now got 2 Erudite Wizards, I think. Was it Alt Shift? Nope, not Alt Shift. Does anyone remember what it was to have a look at the things? I guess I'm not drafting, so it wouldn't work. But yeah, you have to get the 4 cards of the type to have a full play set. But for Brawl, it doesn't matter because you can only play 1 of a single card. Which is why Brawl's a better format. You can just get loads of different cards. Yeah, Homunculus Horde. 3 in a blue for a 2 power, 2 toughness creature Homunculus. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a token that's a copy of this creature. And because it's a copy of this creature, it also has this rule. So if you draw 2 cards in your turn, you get a second Homunculus Horde. If you then draw 2 cards in your opponent's turn, you get 2 more copies of Homunculus Horde. Then on your next turn, if you draw 2 cards, you get 4 more copies of Homunculus Horde. And then 8, and then 16, and then 32, and so on and so forth. And you get exponentially more little 2 power, 2 toughness homunculuses that make more homunculuses. It's very funny, and I like it as a card. It's just kind of silly. Just swarm the board with these little guys with their glowy eyes, just like, oh. And our other rare. Oh, beautiful artwork. So it's one of the stained glass alternate arts, which is one of the game promos. I think the little set symbol there is one of the game promos. Chroma's Memorial. For 7 mana, it is a legendary artifact that says creatures you control have flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, and protection from black and red. This one is, aside from being a beautiful card, a reference to the angel Akroma, who was from a very old set. I can't remember exactly what set. But flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, and protection from black and red was her text box. So this Akroma's Memorial makes all of your creatures into Akromas, which is very fun, just as a little flavour thing. And also just beautiful artwork in the stained glass with a picture of Akroma. And that was all the foundation packs. We're going to keep going through the packs because we want to have enough options when we go to building Brawl decks. Duskmourn, House of Horrors. So Duskmourn, their common lands are, when they enter the battlefield tapped, they enter the battlefield tapped unless a player has 13 or less life. So it's very much a 13 is the unlucky number, but if you're below 13, great. Kind of funny twist. I quite like them. They're not great. Majority of the time they will enter tapped, especially in Commander format where you start at 40 life. I think Brawl you start at 20, so less of an issue there. They might be better in Brawl, but they're just quite nice. As an uncommon land, as a common land cycle, they're just kind of funny. We got a Terramorphic Expanse that is a differently named exact copy of Evolving Wilds. I can't remember which one came first, but Evolving Wilds definitely has more versions of it. I think Evolving Wilds did come first, but I can't be sure on that. I don't want to outright go, Evolving Wilds came first, because I could be wrong. Like, I think Terramorphic Expanse was first printed in, like, Shards of Alara, or something like that. And Evolving Wilds would have been one of the core sets, probably, but I don't know whether it would have been a core set before Shards of Alara or a core set after Shards of Alara. And I could also be wrong. There might be a Terramorphic Expanse that was printed before Shards of Alara, so who knows? The Duskmourn set has a variety of different mechanics, some of which we have survival here on this creature. at the beginning of your second main phase, if the creature with survival, so survival is again a flavor rule, and it basically means in your second main, if this, or at the beginning of your second main phase, if this creature is tapped, you get a thing. They are always stapled to creature type survivors, which is a new creature type for this set, basically to say all the survivors have survival, which is nice. But this one specifically is at the beginning of your second main phase. If it is tapped, put 3 +1/+1 counters on up to one target land you control. That land becomes a 0/0 elemental creature token in addition to its other types. It gains haste until your next turn. So there's a very specific reason as to why those are written that way round. Because if it made it a 0/0 elemental, then put counters on it, I believe it dies before the counters go on. I could be wrong on that one, but they've started ruling it this way just to make sure no one gets confused, basically. So you put 3 +1/+1 counters on it, so that it is effectively a 3/3. This then is altered by anything you have, like if you've got stuff that cares about when you put counters on things, you get double the counters, or you get an extra counter, then it comes in with more counters, which is nice. This also, it gets haste until end of turn, but it is forever a 0/0 elemental creature token in addition to its other types until it is removed from the board. So if someone bounces it back to your hand, it turns back into a land, you play it as your land of turn, it's not still an elemental with no counters and being a 0/0, because then it would just die. It just is a land again. But you can then use this ability again to put 3 more counters on it. Notably, it also doesn't say up to one non-creature land. So once you've made one of your lands into a 3/3, the next time round you trigger this ability, you can put 3 more counters on that elemental land to make it into a 6/6, and so on and so forth. So kind of nice. As an uncommon, pretty good. Not super amazing though. The survival mechanic has its place, and I have a commander deck based around it. That and the convoke mechanic. It's alright. Duskmourn also had a big thing about enchantments, so we've got an enchantment aura here, and for a second there I thought that was an enchantment because it had a slightly sparkly frame, but it didn't, it just had the red frame that makes it look a little bit sparkly. Creature that cares about attacking, kind of generic. Counterspell, kind of generic, but it has the Manifest Dread ability as an alternate. Manifest Dread is one of the other key rules for Duskmourn House of Horrors, and what it does is you look at the top 2 cards of your library, you put one of them onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature, and the other into your graveyard. Putting a creature face down as a 2/2 from Manifest Dread makes it a manifest token, or represented as a manifest creature, which means you can turn it up for its mana value if it's a creature. And you can do that at any time. You can do that at instant speed. You can do that in response to someone else doing something, which is instant speed, me being silly. But because it is a special action, no one can respond to you paying to flip up a creature, because it's a special action. If there's an ability now, notably, if you flip up a creature and by flipping it up it has an ability, they can respond to the ability happening, but they cannot respond to you flipping it up. So if they go to give it -2/-2, and you in response go, why pay to flip it up, it's got 3 toughness, they can't then do something to stop it flipping up, because it's flipped up. I'm trying to think of a more necessary reason as to why that happens, but it's just the way that the morph and manifest abilities work. And then the other thing from Duskmourn, if you look at this really weird card, are the enchantment room subtype, in which this is meant to be a smaller card. So this is one card that you can see outlined around the edge. You can see it sort of, as you see it here, those are actually sideways. On a real card, those two things are sideways, and it looks like this card. So we've got this room. So rooms are enchantments that are split into like two halves. And when you cast them, you cast one side of it, and the other side enters with a locked door over the top. You can then spend the mana cost of the locked side to open it, unlock the door and open that side of the room, meaning that this enchantment then has both abilities. So for Smoky Lounge Misty Saloon, if you cast it for 2 and a red, you get the Smoky Lounge, and at the beginning of your first main phase, you add red, and you may spend this mana only to cast room spells and unlock doors. So it then helps you unlock the Misty Saloon. Or Misty Salon. It looks very odd for a salon. But it's also not spelt saloon, so I guess it is a salon. Which for 3 and a blue, when you unlock this door, you create an XX blue spirit creature token with flying, which you can see here on the left. Or you can see here. This is the spirit token. And XX is represented by the number of unlocked doors among rooms you control. So when you unlock the Misty Salon, you make this spirit, and say you have the Smoky Lounge, the Misty Salon, and another room enchantment with 1 door unlocked. This spirit would then enter with 3 power and 3 toughness because you have 3 rooms unlocked among your rooms. 3 unlocked doors among your rooms. Make sense? Hopefully it makes sense. It's very sort of intuitive when you get into it and when you learn it, but it's confusing when you start out. And then we've got our rare, which is the Abhorrent Oculus. A 2 and a blue for a 5 power, 5 toughness creature eye. Which is very amusing to me because there are not many eye creatures in the game. As an additional cost to cast this spell, exile 6 cards from your graveyard. So it only costs 3 mana, but you also have to exile 6 cards from your graveyard on top of paying the 3 mana to cast this 5 power, 5 toughness creature with flying. So this works quite well off the Manifest Dread stuff because you have to put 1 in your graveyard and 1 face down. It also works quite well off like self-milling strategies, which are in blue, where you kind of just try and mill yourself and put all the cards from your library into your graveyard, which is what milling is. You put a card from your library into your graveyard. And then it has flying. So it's a 5 power, 5 toughness flyer. And at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, you manifest dread. So it then helps you put more cards in your graveyard. Quite good for like if you wanted to run a blue-black reanimator strategy, or just like a mono-blue self-milling strategy to try and get a bunch of stuff. Next, Duskmourn pack. We've got a Peculiar Lighthouse and a Lakeside Shack, which are more of the 13 Life Matters lands. We've got another one of the Most Valuable Slayer. Delirium is another one of the keyword flavor text rules that was reprinted in this set. It was originally printed in Shadows over Innistrad, I want to say. It was definitely the Innistrad block. I'm pretty sure it was in Shadows over Innistrad and not Eldritch Moon. Would have been in both, but I'm pretty sure it started in Shadows. And Delirium is if you have 4 or more card types in your graveyard. So the different card types, some of which we've got here, are land, creature, sorcery, instant, which I don't think we have here, enchantment, artifact, planeswalker, which we haven't opened a planeswalker yet, but we've spoken about them a little bit. Battle, which is specific to one set. They've just started making battles, and the only type of battle that exists at the moment is sieges, but they're kind of cool. I like how they work. I'm interested to see what they do with battles in the future. And then we start to get into the more weird types of cards. So there are more types of cards, but they're more niche, and I don't think they're on Arena, so I'm not going to go into them. If they turn up, I will point them out. hopefully they don't turn up. I mean, hopefully they do turn up. I'd love to build a Delirium deck with like Tribal and Kindred and stuff. But unlikely that we'll see a world enchantment. Anyway, so this card specifically is choose one. If there are 4 more card types in your graveyard, choose one or more instead. So having Delirium lets you pick multiple options for this instance. And your options are creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn. Each opponent discards 2 cards, or each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. So if you have Delirium, you give all your opponent's creatures -1/-1, you make them all discard 2 cards, and you make them all lose 3 life, and then you gain 3 life, which is very good for 4 mana. One of these options for 4 mana is like not great. All of these options for 4 mana is very good. And that's why it's an uncommon. We've got another room here. Mouldering Gym Wait Room. Mouldering Gym is when you unlock this door, you search for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped, so it's a bit of ramp. And the Wait Room is you put 3 counters on a creature. Manifest Dread, and then put 3 counters on that creature. Sorry. We've then also got an artifact equipment, which we had the saddle in our Jumpstart game, so you've kind of seen what equipment do. And specifically, this equipment does a very similar thing, where our saddle that we had made a wolf and attached to the wolf, and then gave the wolf +1/+1 and could only be blocked by 1 creature. This one is you manifest Dread, then it attaches to the manifested creature, and it gives the equipped creature flying. So kind of nice. The way equipment actually works is you can then spend once it's on the battlefield, you can spend the equip cost to attach it to any creature that you control, or any creature that it could attach to. So there are some equipments where you can attach it to opponents, or want to attach it to opponents' creatures. Whereas most equipments are just you control, I think. Another flavor rule from the set of Duskmourn is Eerie, which is similar to Constellation, but also allows you to have unlocking rooms. So it's Constellation plus. We got to see some Constellation when I was reading out my Jumpstart deck. Constellation is whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield. In this instance, on Stalked Researcher, they are a 3 power, 3 toughness defender human wizard for 1 and a blue. And whenever an enchantment enters or whenever you fully unlock a room, they lose defender and therefore can attack. Defender basically is a rule that means they can't attack, and that's it. Thank you, Rich Ornette, for being here. I hope you have a good rest of your evening. And thank you for coming along. The rare from this set also has Eerie, is a card draw, which is pretty nice. And they also have Flash, which is pretty good. The Entity Tracker, for 2 and a blue, they have 2 power, 3 toughness, Human Scout, with Flash and Eerie, draw a card. With a lot of the flavor rules, if I've explained what they do, I will just say the word and then jump over the bit of what that word does, which Eerie is when an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control and whenever you fully unlock a room. So I just jump Eerie, draw a card. Nice, easy way of remembering it. Or not remembering it, but shortcutting it when you know what it does. Last pack of Duskmourn, non-jump, non-alchemy. We've got Neglected Mana, the black-blue Orzhov version of that card. A few nice cards, an enchantment creature, another enchantment creature, an uncommon wild card, instant that draws you cards and makes you glimmers, which is a new creature token for this set. It was also a new creature type for this set, but the glimmer tokens were 1/1 glimmer enchantment creatures. And then a Hushwood Verge, which is one of the rare land cycle from this set, which taps for a type, or can also tap for the other colour of the type if you have one of the basic land types of either of the 2 types. So this wants to go into a green-white deck, and green basic lands are forests, and white basic lands are plains. So if you have a forest or a plain, this can tap for white. Otherwise it just taps for green. Notably, there are some non-basic lands that also have the basic land types of forest or plains or mountain or island or swamp. but that isn't relevant for the moment. So we'll kind of brush across it. And those non-basic lands will very much be land hyphen the types. So land hyphen forest, or land hyphen plains forest, or whatever it might be. Similar to creature hyphen nightmare, creature hyphen rat, land enchantment hyphen room, land artifact hyphen equipment. That is the type and the subtype. And basic land types are subtypes of land. I don't think we want to open the alchemy packs. I can do that off stream. We're more interested in making this deck, which I don't know if we can even include alchemy cards in Brawl decks, especially if we make standard Brawl. But we can't make it a standard Brawl deck. Maybe I do have to open the alchemy packs. I was excited to get to Bloomburrow. We've got a lovely little bark frog, bellowing crier. We've got Runaway Together with beautiful artwork. This was originally printed in a different set, but I love this artwork of just a little otter and like Libo and Pula, the otter and toad that are running away together. Then a common wild card, a Shrike Force, which is a flying, double-striking, vigilant bird knight. One of the mechanics showing up here for Bloomburrow specific, which was gift. And it was basically when you cast the spell, you can give a gift of the type shown, and then the spell gets extra things. So in the instance of Longstalk Brawl, which is 1 green for a sorcery, you gift a tapped 1/1 blue fish creature token. So you give that to one of your opponents, and then you choose target creature you control and target creature you don't control. If you gave them the fish, you put a +1/+1 counter on the creature you control because the gift was promised, and then the two creatures fight each other. So you can, just for 1 green, make one of your creatures punch one of their creatures and their creature punches yours, and you see what happens. If you want the slight edge, you give them a fish and then you fight, because you then get a +1/+1 counter. Some of the other gift options are like gift an opponent a card, so they draw a card. I think those are the main two in standard. There are some commander cards that like gift your opponent an extra turn and that sort of thing, but I don't think that shows up. And we get some rabbit tokens. Hop to it. Hop to it. Make rabbits. And our rare is, Caretaker's Talent. So an enchantment class. Class enchantments were originally printed in the Dungeons and Dragons set. So the reason they are called class enchantments is because they were the D&D classes. So there was things like Sorcerer class, Wizard class, Barbarian class, Fighter class, that all were formatted like this. So they are an enchantment that comes in and has 1 ability, which in this instance for 2 and a white, this Caretaker's Talent is an enchantment that says whenever 1 or more tokens you control enter, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. It's a very good card, especially for tokens. But then you can level up the Caretaker's Talents, which is how classes work. So to get level 2, you spend an extra white. And then when this class becomes level 2, you create a token that's a copy of target token you control, which is pretty nice. Then once you're level 2, you can level it up again to level 3. For 3 and a white, creature tokens you control get +2/+2 power and toughness, which is very good for token decks, because the general idea of token decks is you go wide. So you get a lot more creatures than your opponent does. And so then making all your creature tokens have +2/+2 makes them all bigger. As well as having gone wider than your opponent, you then just also win combats. So Caretaker's Talent is a very good rare. I'm quite happy that I opened it, especially with a hop to it. So I can make 3 rabbits, and I can do this, like if I've got this out, when I make 3 rabbits, I draw a card, and I level it up to make another rabbit, and then I level it up again to make all my rabbits into 4 3/3s. It's a good card. It's also an adorable little rabbit showing a bat around, and the little mouse. Next, Bloomburrow pack. We've got Carrot Cake, an artifact food. Pretty nice. Lizard Warlock, Mouse Bard, Bat Cleric, an instant which has gift of food. That was the one that I forgot. I knew there was another one. So you give your opponents a food token, and then if the gift was promised, this is destroy target creature. If the gift wasn't promised, you lose 2 life. But if you did give them a food, you don't lose 2 life. But then they can use a food to gain 3 life. So maybe good, maybe not good. There's an example of gift a card. Food was another thing that kind of showed up a lot in this format. Food, as you can see here, is a token artifact that you can spend 2 mana and tap it and sacrifice it to gain 3 life, which is pretty nice. Another ability that was Bloomburrow specific is the Offspring mechanic. So Offspring, like Kicker that we had on our Gnarlid in the Jumpstart, is an additional cost that you use to gain a bonus. In the instance of Kicker, it was to put counters on it. In the instance of Offspring, it's you spend an extra 2, and if you do, when it enters, you make a 1/1 copy of it. So you make a token copy that's a 1/1 version of it. So this little lizard, Steampath Charger, is when this creature dies, it deals 1 damage to target player, has 2 power and 1 toughness, and if you paid the Offspring, so you spent 4, you get it as a 2/1, and its little baby Steampath Charger, its Offspring, as a little goofy 1/1 lizard that does the same thing. And we've got a Bat Cleric here that does the same. You've got the big Bat Cleric and then the little baby Bat Cleric that has all the same rules under the Offspring ability. Now rare, Eluge, or Eluge, the Shoreless Sea. So this one's one of the legendary mythics of the set. So I'm quite happy with this. I can use this as a Brawl commander if I need. For 1, blue, I almost said white there. You get a star, which is explained in the rules text. Legendary creature, elemental fish. So Eluge's power and toughness are each equal to the number of islands you control, which if you're playing this in Brawl is likely 4, because you've got to spend 1 and a blue and a blue and a blue, which is 4 islands. If you're trying to cheat it out quicker by playing like Mana Rocks and things, then it will come out as a 3/3 because you'll have to spend 3 blue, or maybe a 2/2. You might have the Mana Rock that makes blue. But then as you play more islands, it will get bigger, which is quite good. It also has the ability of whenever Eluge enters or attacks, put a flood counter on target land. It's an island in addition to its other types for as long as it has a flood counter on it. So as this enters and attacks, it can flood all of your not island mana sources to make itself bigger. It can also flood your opponent's lands to make those into islands, but that would just be giving your opponent options for blue, which isn't super needed. Unless you give a creature Island Walk, which then it's a whole thing. It also has the ability that the first instant or sorcery spell you cast on each turn costs blue less to cast for each land you control with a flood counter on it. So if you flood your own lands, your instant and sorceries get cheaper by blue for each flooded land. I believe this doesn't count down the cost of generic. So as an example, the mana cost of this is 1 blue. So if you have 1 flooded land, it would be 1 blue. If you had 2 flooded land, it would be 1 blue. If you had 3 flooded land, it would just cost 1. If you had 4 flooded land, it would still cost you the 1 generic mana. As an example there. But yeah, a good card. The last Bloomburrow pack. We get War Squeak, nice little enchantment. Another equipment, which has gift tapped fish. And if you gift it, you get to attach it to target creature as it comes in. And you give +2/+3 and loses flying. It's a big sword. Here we go. A little gift a card to reanimate things. Gift a tapped fish. A couple of combat tricks. And Tender Wild Guide. A 1 and a green for a 2 power, 2 toughness creature possum druid with Offspring 2 to make the adorable little possum druid baby. It can tap to add 1 mana of any colour and tap to put a +1/+1 counter on itself. So if you're trying to ramp, they're quite good because they are mana dorks. If you're then getting into the late game and you don't really need the mana, you can just start making them bigger by putting counters on themselves instead of tapping for mana. Quite a nice card. Then we go to the Modern Horizons 3 packs. This is where there's going to be some real power. And a lot more to explain. So we've got a creature here with Menace and Connive. Menace we saw in our Jumpstart game. One of our opponents played Menace, which means it has to be blocked by 2 or more creatures. Connive is you draw a card, then you discard a card, and if the discarded card was a non-land, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. So this is a 2/3 for 4 with Menace that whenever it enters or attacks, it might get bigger. Pretty nice. Human, Knight, Rogue, which are all fairly relevant creature types. We've then got a fight spell that also means you can fight a Planeswalker, it's not even a fight spell, it's a punch, which is a one-sided fight spell. So it's your creature deals damage to something without getting dealt damage back for 1 mana. And if you control an Eldrazi, you gain 3 life. So an Eldrazi relevant 1 mana punch spell. We've then got an enchantment of the subtype Saga. So this probably gets in our enchantment deck. Well, definitely gets in our enchantment deck. For 3 white. The way Sagas work is they have, as you can see in like the little brackets here at the top of the card, as this Saga enters and after your draw step, you add a lore counter. And then when it's finished its final ability, it sacrifices itself. So Ajani Fells the Godsire is 3 white. The first step of the saga is exile target creature and opponent controls with power 3 or greater. So it kills a giant creature. Specifically exiles, so if they care about their creatures dying, exile does not go to the graveyard and does not count as dying, but still gets removed from the game. The second step is then you create a 2/1 white cat warrior creature token, and then you put a vigilance, sorry, I almost said a +1/+1 counter. You put a vigilance counter on a creature you control. Putting a vigilance counter or a keyword counter on a creature gives that creature that keyword. So if you don't have any creatures when this step 2 triggers, you get a 2/1 white cat warrior and then give it vigilance. It's alright. Alternatively, you just make a token and then give one of your bigger things vigilance, which is nicer. And then step 3 is target creature you control gains double strike until end of turn, which is nice. It means it hits in the first strike damage and the regular damage steps of combat. We then have a Cephalid Colosseum, which has Threshold. Threshold cares if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard. So if we play that big eye creature, this will enjoy the big eye creature because you'll be able to use its ability to draw 3 cards and discard 3 cards. We then have a legendary Goblin Wizard that when they enter they deal 4 damage, and they have Grandeur. You can discard another card named Skoa Ember Mage and sacrifice 2 mountains, and then it deals 4 damage to any target. Grandeur is a weird mechanic. It basically is like there are a limited number of legendary creatures that all have the Grandeur flavor word ability, which basically means if you draw another copy of them, you can just throw it away to get us something. We then have the Cranial Ram, which is an artifact equipment with the Living Weapon ability. Living Weapon is when the artifact enters, you make a 0/0 Phyrexian Germ token and attach the equipment to it. And this Cranial Ram gives equipped creature +X+1, where X is the number of artifacts you control. So if it's the only spell you've cast, it comes in, makes the Phyrexian Germ, attaches to the Phyrexian Germ, and gives +1/+1, because it is an artifact. If you have other artifacts on the field, it gets more power, but is always 1 toughness. And you can also equip it to other creatures for 2 mana, which then gives them +X+1, where X is the number of artifacts. So pretty good. We then have Fangs of Colonia, which is a sorcery that puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, then doubles the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature that had a +1/+1 counter put on it this way. So if you're going big, you can spend 2 mana to put a counter on a thing that already has a bunch of counters, and then double the number of counters on it. So put on it this way. So you give a thing a counter and put another one on it for 2 mana. Or it has the Overload ability, which is why it's worded this way. And sorry, so much talking, reading all the rules. The overload ability is you replace any instances of the word target for each. So it would then, if you cast it for 4 green, because it's an alternate casting cost ability, it would then make the spell read, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, then double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature that had a +1/+1 counter put on it this way. So for 6 mana, you give all of your creatures 2 +1/+1 counters, which is pretty nice. And then we get an Emperor of Bones. Oh, there's so much reading. Emperor of Bones is a 2 power, 2 toughness creature skeleton noble for 1 and a black. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. So that shuts off other people's threshold, that shuts off other people's delirium. Pretty good to counteract opponents. It stops people recurring and reanimating big threats if you exile them. And then for 1 and a black, it adapts to. So adapt is you spend a mana cost to put that number of counters on it. And you can do that once, I think. You might be able to do that multiple times. I think you can only adapt once, because then once you've adapted, it is an adapted creature. I think that's how it works. So you adapt to make this into a 4 power, 4 toughness, because it will have 2 counters on. And whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on Emperor of Bones, you put a creature card exiled with Emperor of Bones onto the battlefield under your control with a finality counter on it. It gains haste and sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. A finality counter means that if the creature would die, for example from being sacrificed at the end step, it gets exiled instead. Which, for Emperor of Bones, doesn't care? I don't think, no, because it would then be exiled by the finality counter, not by Emperor of Bones. So you can't reanimate a thing over and over and over again, because when the finality counter kills it, it's not the Emperor of Bones exiling it. Cool. Modern Horizons pack number 2. So many abilities in the Modern Horizons set. We've got a Death Touch Mana Dork. We've got a modal double face card, which on the front side is a 3/1 goblin, and on the back side is a land that taps for black. We've got a card with Unearth, which is you can return it from your graveyard at the beginning of your end step. You can return it from your graveyard to the battlefield, it gains haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step, or if it would leave the battlefield. And you can only do that as a sorcery. We've got another living weapon. We've got a double rare pack, a common wild card, an uncommon wild card, and our rares are then Wheel of Potential, which is a weird card. So for 2 and a red, it is a sorcery with you get energy. So you get 3 energy counters on you as a player. Then you may pay any amount of energy counters that's on you as a player. Each player may exile their hand and draw a number of cards equal to the amount of energy paid this way. If 7 or more energy was paid this way, you may play cards you own exiled this way until the end of your next turn. So a wheel, in colloquial Magic the Gathering terms, is a card that makes you discard your hand and draw a new hand. Most notably, Wheel of Fate, which was, I believe, the original card that the word wheel came from. I think so. And Wheel of Fate was basically each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards. This one notably puts them in exile, so it gets around things like Unearth, or a few other things, like Emperor of Bones can't exile your creatures if you've exiled them yourself. But it doesn't give you enough energy on its own to do the last ability of being able to cast the cards you exiled. But that's all good, because the energy deck makes lots of energy. Our other rare is Cursed Mirror, which, as you can see by the watermark, was reprinted from one of the Commander decks. I believe it was the Strixhaven Commander deck. I could be wrong on that one. But for 2 and a red, Cursed Mirror is an artifact with no subtype. It taps for a red mana, so it's a mana rock. And when it enters, or as it enters, you may have it become a copy of any creature on the battlefield until end of turn, except it has haste. So Cursed Mirror comes in as a copy of a different creature. Say you had this Molten Gatekeeper. It comes in as another Molten Gatekeeper, which would then get the ability of whenever another creature you control enters, deals 1 damage to each opponent. Because it comes in as a creature, it would trigger your Molten Gatekeeper, your original Molten Gatekeeper, so you'd deal 1 damage to each opponent, because it enters as a creature. And then it also has haste, so it can then attack, or use tap abilities like the tap add red. But then when the turn finishes, it turns back into just a mana rock that taps for red. Last Modern Horizons 3-pack. We've got an Eldrazi Trilobite, which has cycling. Cycling allows you to spend the cycling cost and discard it to draw a card. So it's sort of like if you don't have 7 mana, but you've got 3 mana, 2 and a blue, you can cycle this by discarding it and drawing a new card. And then whenever you cast or cycle this, you make an Eldrazi Spawn, which is a token that is a 0/1 that can sacrifice to add a colourless mana. We've got a Nyx Bloom Unicorn, which is an enchantment creature unicorn. It has Bestow, which means you can cast it as an enchantment aura attached to a creature you control. And it has Mentor, which is whenever this creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature with less power. So if you bestow this onto something, it will get +2/+2 and Mentor, which is pretty nice. We've got a creature here with flying, and Devoid cares about drawing second card. So maybe if we do the drawing 2 cards a turn to get use of our little homunculus horde, this will probably also get in the deck. Makes Eldrazi Spawns. I mean, it has Devoid, which makes it a colourless card for the purposes of things like if you had a removal spell that destroyed target black creature, or target white creature, or target green creature. This is not, or more importantly, target blue creature. While this has a blue mana symbol, because it is Devoid, it is not a blue creature. Whereas this one just isn't a blue creature because it's only colourless mana symbols. We've got an Annoyed Allosaur, where it has Reach, so it can block creatures with flying. It has Trample, which we used quite a lot in our Jumpstart game. And it has Cascade, which is when you cast this spell, you exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a card, a non-land card specifically, with less mana value. And then you can cast that card that you exiled, that you revealed from exiling, without paying its mana cost. The Cascaded spell will resolve before the spell with Cascade. It's a weird ruling, but it's quite cool. We have a common wild card. We have a big Eldrazi that cares about casting colourless, or cares about having a number of colourless permanents, which is where Devoid comes in. Has hexproof from each colour, which is pretty nice. And Annihilator 2, which is one of the meanest mechanics in Magic the Gathering. It is the Eldrazi specific mechanic, the big mechanic that made them the nemesis. The evil big bad was represented by them having Annihilator. And what Annihilator does is when this creature attacks, the defending player has to sacrifice a number of permanents equal to the number of Annihilator on it. I think the highest Annihilator on a card is Annihilate 5, maybe Annihilate 6, which is backbreaking in a game, in all honesty, because you attack once, and they have to get rid of half their board, because they have to sacrifice 6 permanents. Noticeably, it does not say non-land permanents, so you might just end up blowing up all your lands. Or might just be forced to blow up all your lands if they attack with enough Annihilator. And our rare is a Volatile Storm Drake. For 1 and a blue, you get a 3 power, 2 toughness creature Drake with flying, hexproof from activated and triggered abilities, which is pretty nice. Noticeably hexproof, so you can equip your own stuff onto it, because hexproof means it can't be targeted by your opponent's things. And when it enters, you exchange control of Volatile Stormdrake and target creature and opponent controls. If you do, you get 4 energy. Then sacrifice that creature unless you pay an amount of energy equal to its mana value. So it trades itself away. Which then means your opponent gets a 3/2 flyer that has hexproof from your activated abilities. But you get one of their bigger creatures. For example, the 8/4 with Annihilator 2. You just then have to spend 8 energy, which it gives you 4. It's pretty good. Yeah, pretty good card. We move on to Outlaws of Thunder Junction. I'll try and speed through these packs because we want to get back into the game. Non-basic land, enters tap, deals 1 damage to target opponent. Noticeable for that it targets an opponent, because one of the mechanics for Outlaws of Thunder Junction was committing crimes, which you do by targeting your opponents, their stuff, with things. So things like target creature and opponent controls gets -2/-2, that's committing a crime. Dealing 1 damage to target opponent is committing a crime. Dealing X damage to target creature, as long as it's your opponent's creature, that's committing a crime. Another mechanic, plot. Plot is similar to the Kaltime mechanic Foresight. Once it was Foresight, 4C, something like that. In that you pay a cost to put this off to the side. Plot cards have to be put face up, I believe, whereas Foresight cards are face down so that your opponent doesn't know what it is. You can only plot as a sorcery. I'm pretty sure you can only Foresight as a sorcery as well. Really hope I'm getting that mechanic's name correct. But then you can cast it out from plot as a sorcery, but without paying its mana cost, which is pretty good. Or the Foresight cards had a cheaper mana cost for getting them out of the Foresight zone, the Exile zone. Spree was another mechanic in which spells had the little plus symbol in their mana costs, like you can see here on Unfortunate Accident. So for black, plus. Casting it for black is just casting an instant that does nothing. For the purposes of triggering casting instants or sorceries, it's okay. So like Thunderous Salvo, where it's deals X damage, where X is 2 plus the number of other spells you've cast this turn. Maybe you just want to cast another spell for black because you've got a black mana still open and you're like, if I can get an extra 1 damage in, I can kill that bigger creature. But you can also plus the things. So for an extra 2 and a black, you destroy target creature. So for 2 black, this spell destroys target creature. It's not right for a kill spell. Or for an extra 1, you make a mercenary, represented by this token here. We are feeling Magical Sun Tzu. Welcome. I'm trying to run through these packs as quickly as possible because this is all of the packs we get as a new starting player. And there's so many different sets in the game of Arena that trying to explain all the mechanics is taking a long time. My plan after this is to build a Brawl deck, maybe do a draft if we don't have enough cards, but hopefully we will. And then play some Brawl or some Draft or something. I also need a food break at some point, which is getting to that time. But I've still got so many packs to go through. But yeah, so for 1 and a black, if you cast Unfortunate Accident for 1 and a black, you just make the mercenary. You can also, because it's the plus ability, you can cast it for both modes, which would be 3 black, and you then destroy target creature, then make a mercenary. So Spree cards are pretty good. They're modal cards that just have a bunch of different options. We've then got Wily Duke, Atin Hero, who, while not having the survival ability, kind of works alongside it. So if I did open a lot of survival cards, I might put this guy in and a bunch of saddle stuff. But he's here for the saddle mechanic, is basically why Wily Duke exists. For 1 green and white, you get a 4 power, 2 toughness legendary creature human ranger with vigilance. So they don't tap when they attack. And whenever they do become tapped, you gain a life and draw a card. So by using like the saddle mechanic, you tap them to saddle a different creature with saddle, and that then taps them, which then makes you gain a life and draw a card. It's pretty nice. And then we've got a old school double modal card, but in the alt art for Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Crime and Punishment. I believe this was originally printed in original Ravnica block. I don't know the exact set, might have been Dissension, but I'm not 100% on that one. It's a sorcery on both sides. On one side, for 3 mana, a white and a black, so 5 total, you put target creature or enchantment card from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So you just steal one of their enchantments that they've lost. Or creatures. Pretty sure you're going to hit something good off that. Or for the other side, punishment, I keep going to hover over the display. For X, black, green, you destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with mana value X. So however much you put into that, the more stuff or the bigger the stuff you destroy. But it's specifically with the mana value X. So it only destroys 1 level of mana value. A pretty good card. Next, Thunder Junction pack. I swear I'll speed up with these, but every time I get through the 3, I then have to explain more mechanics. We've got a sheep, saddle 2. Saddle here now getting explained. You tap any number of other creatures you control with total power equal to the saddle number to mount the creature. Make sense? Kind of. The saddle mechanic is kind of based off the crew mechanic from Kaladesh, but the crew mechanic was non-creature artifacts that became creatures when they were crewed. Saddle is just, they are creatures that when you saddle them get an extra bonus. In this instance, it's whenever it attacks, as long as it's saddled, you make the sheep token, seen here jumping over a fence. And it's a 3/4 with vigilance for 4. Pretty nice. Another saddle up here, but we'll jump over that. Another prosperity card, which is pretty cool. It's a one-sided fight. We've got another plot card. And our rare is Magda, who cares about committing crimes that I talked about a second ago. So Magda the Horde Master for 1 and a red. She's a 2 power, 2 toughness legendary creature dwarf berserker. Whenever you commit a crime, create a tapped treasure token. Treasures are artifact tokens that tap and sacrifice themselves to add a mana of any colour. So she ramps you. This ability triggers only once each turn. So your turn, opponent's turn, and so on. And you sacrifice 3 treasures to make a 4/4 red scorpion dragon creature token with flying and haste. But you can only do that as a sorcery. So here we go. The exact of committing a crime is targeting an opponent, anything they control, so like one of their lands, one of their creatures, one of their enchantments, one of their artifacts, their planeswalker, whatever, and or cards in their graveyard. So targeting their library does not count. But their graveyard, their permanents, or their face. All are committing crimes. And the last Thunder Junction pack, we've got some cards, a couple more plot cards, another couple of spree cards, pretty nice. A common wild card, Electro Dominance, which is an X burn spell that you deal X damage to target creature, and then you may cast a spell with mana value X or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. It's pretty nice. Electro Dominance, I believe, was originally reprinted in Return to Ravnica? No, Guilds of Ravnica. I think it was originally printed in Guilds of Ravnica. And then we got our first Planeswalker. Here we go, some more explaining. The face of the set, Oko the Ringleader. So Planeswalkers, looking at them looks similar to none of the cardboard cracked. Yes, no. And for saying that in my chat, you get foofed. Foof! Foof at you! No. Foof. Yeah, I'm having a good time. There's way too much to open. So, Oko the Ringleader. Similarly formatted to things like the sagas and the classes, but work differently. So Planeswalker is its own type. Every Planeswalker is legendary. So the super type legendary, the type Planeswalker, and their subtype is their character name. In this instance, Oko, for he is the ringleader. The way Planeswalkers work is they enter, as you can see in the bottom right-hand side, with a number of loyalty counters. For Oko the ringleader, he enters with 3. They then have an ability, a list of abilities, which sometimes are passive, like you can see with his top ability here, has no loyalty symbol next to it, so it is just a passive ability, which reads, at the beginning of combat on your turn, Oko the ringleader becomes a copy of up to one target creature you control until end of turn, except he has hexproof. So he pretends to be other things by becoming copies of them. Then you have loyalty abilities, which are activated abilities that you activate by ticking up or ticking down the amount of loyalty on the Planeswalker. So he starts with 3, and for +1, moving him up to 4, you draw 2 cards. Then if you've committed a crime... Yes, so you draw 2 cards. If you've committed a crime, you discard 1 card. Otherwise, you discard 2 cards. So if you haven't committed a crime, you draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards. If you have committed a crime, you draw 2 cards, discard 1 card. Pretty good. For -1, for -1 loyalty, you create a 3/3 green elk token, as you can see across the side there. And then for -5, for each other non-land permanent you control, you create a token that's a copy of that permanent, which is very strong. The bottom ability on a Planeswalker is known as their ultimate, for the most part. Some Planeswalkers don't have ultimate abilities. And this is sort of a colloquially known. I don't think Wizards ever actually calls them an ultimate ability. But they are normally game-winning abilities, or very, very strong abilities. So we've got the passive of he becomes a copy, a card draw mechanic, which is pretty good, a way to make blockers, because people can attack your Planeswalkers directly. So people can attack Oko if you have no creatures open. You'll just play him, draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, and then he'll die, because someone will just hit him for 3. So that's how loyalty works, is their loyalty acts like their life total. So if someone attacks him for 1, he takes down 1 loyalty. If someone attacks him for 5, he takes down 5 loyalty. When he has no loyalty, he is moved to the graveyard. He is destroyed as a state-based action and dead. But yeah, a pretty good card for 2 green blue, 3 loyalty, draws cards, makes elks, can make all of your stuff, and also becomes a copy of a creature. Very nice. Then we move on to Murders at Karlov Manor. We have Disguise as a mechanic. Similar to Manifest Dread, you can disguise this creature for 3. It comes in as a face-down 2/2 creature. So that's how Morph works as well. If you spend 3 mana to put it in as a face-down 2/2. It has to be in your hand when you do this. But the upside of Disguise is it also, the face-down creature has Ward 2, which means it can't be targeted by spells or abilities your opponents control unless they spend an extra 2 mana for it. Because otherwise it counters the ability. And then you can spend its Disguise cost to flip it face up. Investigate is the other mechanic on this Detective Elf Crocodile. And Investigate makes clue tokens. So whenever you would investigate, you make a clue, which is a token artifact clue. You spend 2 and sacrifice it to draw a card. Pretty nice. And the way that this Crocodile, which is a great card, Undercover Crocodile, is they deal combat damage to a player to investigate. We've got another Disguise card, a card that bounces a thing and then investigates, a card that cares about sacrificing artifacts. So if you use a clue to draw a card, you sacrifice the clue, which then makes this not able to be blocked. Bit of mana fixing on an artifact creature golem, sacrifice outlet, a permanent your opponent's control can't be turned face up during your turn. So that stops opponents from using the disguise ability in your turn, which is pretty nice. And then the Cryptex. For 2 mana, an artifact with tap Collect Evidence 3. So Collect Evidence is another mechanic from Murders of Karlov Manor. And to collect evidence, you either exile cards with total mana value 3 or greater from your graveyard. Yes, I think that's how you, I think it is just that. You exile cards from your graveyard. I'm pretty sure that's that. I had a feeling there was another way you collected evidence, but it must just be that. Otherwise it would tell me. And then also you can sacrifice this Cryptex to surveil 3 and then draw 3 cards. But you can only do that if it has 5 or more unlock counters on it. So you tap it to collect evidence 3, to add a mana of any colour, and put an unlock counter on it. And then when it hits 5, you can mill 3 cards. Surveil is looking at the top 3 cards of your library, and you can put them back in any order or any of them into the graveyard. And then you draw 3 cards. So if you find 3 really good cards off your Surveil, you just put them all back on top and then draw them all. Oh, my throat is dying from all this reading. Okay. We've then got more Investigate, more Disguise, an uncommon wildcard, a clue creature, the red herring, an artifact land with the subtype of clue, which means it also has the clue ability of 2 and sacrifice to draw a card. It can also tap for a colours, and it can also tap and untap an untapped creature you control, which works quite well with like Wily Duke, for instance, or any of the survival creatures, to add 1 mana of any colour. So Scene of the Crime is quite good if we need it for a Wily Duke deck or a survival deck. And then we have Lazav, Wearer of Faces. They are a 2 power, 3 toughness, for blue and black. They are 2 power, 3 toughness, legendary creature, shapeshifter, detective. Almost called Lazav a human. That would be incorrect. When Lazav, Wearer of Faces attacks, you exile target card from a graveyard, then investigate. And whenever you sacrifice a clue, you may have Lazav become a copy of a creature card exiled with it until end of turn. So Lazav can be anyone. Could be anyone. That's a running Magic joke, is that Lazav could be anybody. Last Murders pack. We've got another spell that investigates, or Disguise, an Escape Tunnel, which is an upsided version of Terramorphic Expanse or Evolving Wilds, with the extra ability of you can sacrifice it to give target creature with power 2 or less unblockable for the turn. And then the other mechanic from the set, Suspect. So it doesn't add up. For 3 black, it's an instant with return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it's a reanimator spell, and then you suspect it. And Suspect is a ability that means it has menace and can't block. So it's an aggressive ability, but quite good. Yes. We then have our rare of Connect the Dots. For 1 and a red, an enchantment with whenever a creature you control attacks, exile the top card of your library face down. You can't look at it. Ooh, secrets. And then for 1 and a red, you discard your hand, sacrifice Connect the Dots, and put all cards exiled with Connect the Dots into their owner's hand. So you kind of build up a second hand in the exile zone. And then if you can actually get off the ability, you dump whatever you have of your hand to draw all of the exiled cards, which is pretty good. Now we're starting to get into the legacy sets. Khans of Tarkir. Hopefully we draw some fetch lands, but maybe not. We have Amardu Banner. Pretty nice. We have an Abomination of Gudul, which has the Morph ability, which I mentioned with Disguise. Same as Disguise, except it doesn't get the Ward 2. A common wild card. Another Morph. A Trick that gives it protection from colour of your choice and a +1/+1 counter. It's pretty nice. And our rare is Rattleclaw Mystic. So for 1 and a green, they are a 2 power, 1 toughness creature human shaman. They tap to add green or blue or red, and they have morph for 2. So you morph it face down for 3, you flip it up for 2. When you flip it up, it adds green, blue, red. So you gain a mana and it filters your colourless mana into green, blue, red, which is the Teamer block or wedge. Tarkir was the set with wedges. So a pretty good mana talk, but requires you to be in that wedge. We then have another common wild card, another morph, but this one is one of the morphs where you just reveal a card from your hand to flip it face up. And then it has the face up ability of when it flips face up, gains trample, target creature gains trample. A modal card, pretty good, Abzan Charm. Exile target creature with power 3 or greater, draw 2 cards, lose 2 life, or distribute 2 counters among 2 creatures. 1 or 2 creatures. And then a rare wild card. Come on, get me a fetch land. Dismal Backwater, Mystic Monastery, 2 lands, some more morph cards, a counterspell, Disdainful Stroke's pretty good, and an Icy Blast. It's an X spell with Ferocious, which was another mechanic from another flavor rule text, which basically cares about having power, a creature with power 4 or greater. And this Icy Blast basically taps down X creatures, and then if you have Ferocious, they don't untap in the next turn. We then go to Lost Caverns of Ixalan. I'm going to have to speed race through these, so I might not read out the specific mechanics. We got maps, we got swamp cycling, we got finality counters, which I mentioned before, and a Trumpeting Carnosaur, also an uncommon wild card. 4 red for a 7/6 creature dinosaur. Trample. When it enters, you discover 5. Discover is similar to Cascade that we saw earlier, but it's mana value equal or less, and if you don't cast it, it goes back into your hand rather than on the bottom. So it's Cascade with upside. It can also be discarded to deal 3 damage to target creature or player. Next pack, we have got a bit more equipment, a couple more spells, a gnome, another dinosaur, 2 and a green for a Pugnacious Hammer Skull, 6 power, 6 toughness, creature dinosaur. When it attacks, while you don't control another dinosaur, put a stun counter on it. So it's a cheap, big creature, similar to the Eye, with downside. As in, if it attacks and you don't have dinosaurs, it doesn't untap in your next untap step because it has a stun counter. Next pack of Ixalan. Ooh, a new enchantment in white. Also a cat that makes gnomes. Can't make gnomes. Enchant artifact or creature, enchant a permanent, can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. Pretty nice. We've got Descent 4, Discover 4, Ward, an enchantment that cares about caves, which we currently don't have any caves, so that's probably not getting in the enchantment deck. And a sorcery with Fathomless Descent, which is another flavor text rule. Squirming Emergence. For 1 black-green sorcery, Fathomless Descent. Return to the battlefield. Target non-land permanent in your graveyard with mana value less than or equal to the number of permanents in your graveyard. And it's that little bit at the bottom, the equal to number of permanents in your graveyard, that is Fathomless Descent. That just makes a bat for each mana, and then whenever a cave enters, you put a counter on a creature. So yeah, if I end up not opening any caves, this bat colony does nothing, and therefore definitely will not get into my mono white enchantment deck. Eldraine pack. We got Goblin that makes treasure, another Saga that makes treasure, a food, a common wild card, a creature in white that makes a roll aura enchantment token, pretty good, might get into the deck because the roll gives +1/+1, and whenever this creature attacks, scry 1, which, while not being card draw, this scrying is like almost card draw, and card drawing is pretty important in the game. Then white, destroy target enchantment. Nice. Oversold Cemetery is one of the fancy art alt arts from Wilds of Eldraine. You can see like all the like swirls and interesting framework. For 1 and a black, it's an enchantment with, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 4 or more creature cards in your graveyard, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Ooh, and then a mythic wild card, so we can exchange that for something strong. We're getting there with these packs. Taking a while, but we're getting there. We've got Celebration, which is a flavor reminder text that cares about having 2 or more non-land permanents entering in a turn. We got another thing that makes a roll. We've got some scrying. We've got another fancy enchantment. And then Expel the Interlopers. 3 white, white for a sorcery. Choose a number between 0 and 10. Destroy all creatures with power greater than or equal to the chosen number. So if you pick 0, for example, it destroys all creatures for 5 mana. Greater than or equal to the chosen number. So even if people have 0 power creatures, if you pick 0, it destroys all the creatures. But if you've got all the 1-drops, like all your creatures have 1 power or 2 power, and everyone else's creatures have more power, you just pick like 3 or 2, and you destroy all of their creatures. So it could be a one-sided board wipe, which is pretty nice if you're in that deck, like the Delny deck. Another Evolving Wilds, an adventure card, which adventure cards are, they have a main card and then the little sub-card adventure, which are spells, instants or sorceries. And if you cast them for the adventure, they do the thing and go to the exile zone, and then you can cast the rest of the main card from the exile zone. They go on an adventure. We've got a fairy that cares about fairies, and a fairy that cares about attacking with 1 or more fairies. So a fairy that cares about fairies. And then it draws you cards, so it does the extra card draw. And an uncommon wild card, which is pretty nice. Bargain is also a mechanic where you can sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token to get an extra thing. Then we move on to Lord of the Rings, Tales for Middle-earth. We've got a lot of cards in these packs. Okay, I'm not reading all of these. Let's have a look at those. King of the Oathbreakers. 2 white, black, 3 power, 3 toughness, legendary creature, spirit noble. Flying. When King of the Oathbreakers or another spirit you control becomes the target of a spell or ability, it phases out, which is very strong. When King of the Oathbreakers or another spirit you control phases in, phasing is a bit of a nightmare of a mechanic. Simple when you get it. A permanent phases out, and at the beginning of your next upkeep it phases back in again. While it's phased out, it counts as not being a permanent. So it kind of exiles itself, but it doesn't actually go to the exile zone. When King of the Oathbreakers or another spirit you control phases in, create a tapped 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Also notably, it's just playing the Lord of the Rings music now. We also opened a Nazgul, which cares about the ring, which is another mechanic all in itself. And we have a mass orcs with Saruman the White. We've got an uncommon card, another enchantment. Any white enchantment matters things? Common card? No white enchantment matters things. A rare wild card. And Call of the Ring. I'm now going to have to explain what the ring does. Call of the Ring is an enchantment for 1 and a black. At the beginning of your upkeep, the ring tempts you. So, the ring is an ability where whenever the ring tempts you, you get the next layer of this reminder card called the Ring. And you pick a creature you control to be your ring bearer. So whenever the ring tempts you, you can pick a new ring bearer. And it still ticks up a level of the ring, similar to sagas or classes. Whenever the ring tempts you, you go to the next level of the ring. You keep all the previous levels as well, so it just gets stronger. So the top level is your ring bearer is legendary and can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. The next level is whenever your ring bearer attacks, you draw a card, then discard a card. The third level is whenever your ring bearer becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller sacrifices it at the end of combat. So kind of death touch, but delayed death touch. And the last layer is whenever your ring bearer deals combat damage to a player, each opponent loses 3 life. The other thing the Call of the Ring does is whenever you choose a creature as your ring bearer, you may pay 2 life. If you do, draw a card. So it's pretty nice. Pretty good card. Oh, I only got 1 Lord of the Rings. Oh, I clicked the open all. That's why we had a bunch of cards. Why have I not been doing that previously? Open all the March of the Aftermath ones. Quickly scroll back and have a look. We've got some Incubate, which makes incubation tokens that you can flip over into Phyrexians. They come in with a number of counters. You flip them over into creatures that are 0/0s with that many counters on. So Incubate 5 puts 5 counters on this incubation token. We've got some Phyrexian mana symbols, which you pay either the colour of mana or 2 life. We've got Backup, which is when this creature enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and then that creature gets all the abilities on this creature for the turn. We've got some auras, pretty nice. Enchantment, Wrath, who's a legendary, pretty cool. 2 copies of Goldforged Thopter. Ooh, Emote. Emote's pretty good. So, right. This set didn't have many cards, but what it did have was a bunch of treatments for specific cards. So this is like the Dominaria treatment of Wrath, Weatherlight, Stalwart. Who cares about casting instants or sorceries? Taps a bunch of your creatures and draws you cards, and then you can give a bunch of your creatures vigilance. Emote, who is in the Amonkhet Invocation special frame, has Cascade, and then your big spells have Cascade, which we talked about before. We've then got a Nahiri's Resolve for 3 red, white. It's an enchantment with creatures you control get +1/+0 and have haste. At the beginning of your end step, exile any number of non-token artifacts and or creatures you control. Return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So if you've got a bunch of things that care about entering the battlefield, you can flicker them all. Pretty nice. We have a Kaladesh Invention version of Baral, Chief of Compliance, who, for 1 and a blue, is a legendary creature human wizard with 1 power 3 toughness. I had to talk very quickly because I'm starting to get to the point where I'm getting hungry. I've still got a lot of packs to open. They make your instants and sorceries cost 1 less, and whenever a spell or ability you control counters a spell, so they want to play a lot of counter spells, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. We've then got Training Grounds, which is a good enchantment in specific decks. For a blue, it's an enchantment. Activated abilities of creatures you control cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana of that ability to less than 1. So for instance, if I had a Training Grounds in my Wrath deck, that bottom bit where it says 3 white, creatures you control get +1/+1 and vigilance until end turn is an activated ability. So with Training Grounds out, it would cost 1 white, which is really good. And then we have an Ayara's Oath Sworn. For 1 and a black, they are a 2 power 2 toughness creature human knight with menace. When they deal combat damage to a player, if it has fewer than 4 counters on it, put a counter on it. If it has exactly 4 counters on it, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. That's a very good card. Let's quickly jump over to the March of the Machines packs and open all of those. We've got another Wrath, Weatherlight Stalwart. Some more Flip Phyrexian cards. A Siege. I mentioned these before. They are card type Battle, subtype Siege. Invasion of Kaladesh specifically, it also flips into a vehicle, which has the crew ability that I mentioned earlier. But it is a siege with, when Invasion of Kaladesh enters, you make a 1/1 colourless Thopter. Sieges work by, when it enters, you give it to an opponent. It then has a number of siege counters on it, similarly to loyalty counters, and you can attack the battle like you would with a Planeswalker. When you reduce the number of siege counters on it to 0, it flips over and comes back to you. So you then get Aether Wing Golden Scale Flagship, which is a legendary artifact vehicle with flying. It has power equal to the number of artifacts you control and 4 toughness and crew 1. So the Thopter you get by casting the invasion can crew Aetherwing, which would then by default be a 2/4 because you would have a Thopter and Aetherwing that are both artifacts. It can then get very big because you could just have loads of artifacts. We've got an uncommon wildcard, a common wildcard, a bunch of the non-basic lands that gain you a life when you enter tapped. Heliod, the Radiant Dawn, who is a Phyrexian flip card, and a god. So they are 2 white for a 4 power, 4 toughness, legendary enchantment creature god. When they enter, you return an enchantment card that isn't a god from your graveyard to your hand. And for 3 and a blue Phyrexian mana, you can transform it, which you activate only as a sorcery. It transforms into Heliod the Warped Eclipse, who is a legendary enchantment creature Phyrexian god, which gets cut off there because that line is too full of stuff. It has 4 power and 6 toughness on this side. It has, whenever you cast you may cast spells as though they had flash, which means you can cast them at instant speed. And spells... Flashback. Why is it telling me about flashback? That's not relevant to this card at all. I don't know why it's telling me about flashback. That's not relevant to this card. You may cast spells as though they had flash, and spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. So Heliod returns a spell, returns an enchantment, flips over, and then cares about your opponents drawing a bunch of cards. Quite a fun card. Oh gosh. So we've got a really good commander here. Atraxa Praetor's Voice. For green, white, blue, black. They are a legendary creature Phyrexian Angel Horror. They have 4 power, 4 toughness, flying, vigilance, death touch, lifelink, and at the beginning of your end step you proliferate. So flying we've already covered, vigilance we've already covered. Death touch is when it deals damage to a creature it kills it. Lifelink is when it deals damage it gains that much life. This is also in the New Capenna showcase frame. And proliferate, at the beginning of your end step you proliferate, which is you can choose any number of permanents and or players that have a counter on. You put an extra counter of every type that's on that creature or player. So it does energy, it does +1/+1 counters, it does like the vigilant counter we saw earlier. It's pretty good. It's a very good card. It does the Phyrexian ability of Infect really well, where you put poison counters on your opponent, and then if you get them to 10 poison counters, they lose the game. Because you can just proliferate them to 10 poison counters. It also is a legendary creature, so it can be our commander for the Brawl format, and has 4 colours, which means you get to play all 4 colours in your deck. Borborygmos and Fibblethip. They are a 5-drop, 2 green, blue, red, for a 6/5 legendary creature Cyclops Homunculus. Whenever Borborygmos and Fibblethip enters or attacks, draw a card. Then you may discard any number of land cards. When you discard 1 or more cards this way, this card deals twice that much damage to target creature. So he commits crimes. Because he hits creatures by discarding... He also draws cards, which is very good. And for 1 and a blue, you put it into its owner's library 3rd from the top. Which is weird. It's an odd way to dodge removal by just putting yourself 3rd from the top of your deck. Not great.
Time to light up the darkness.
Another Planeswalker, Chandra Hope's Beacon. For 4 red, she comes in with 4 loyalty. She has the passive ability of whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it. So it does the double cast that Nicol Bolas did in the tutorial. You may choose new targets for the copy. This ability triggers once a turn. For +2, you add 2 mana in any combination of colours. For +1, you exile the top 5 cards of your library and you may cast them. You may cast instant or sorceries from among them this turn. Until your next turn. Until the end of your next turn. So this turn and your next turn and your opponent's turn, you can cast the instants or sorceries from among them. You do still have to pay for them, but 5 free cards in your hand is very good. And then for -X, she deals X damage to each of up to 2 targets. So it can be your opponent, it can be your opponent's creatures, it could be your own creatures, it could be yourself. You could make the game a draw by just being like, I'm -1,000,000 and shoot me and my opponent for 1,000,000. Obviously, you can only -X the amount of loyalty she has. So when she comes in, you could only -5. But for 6 mana, dealing 5 damage to your opponent and one of their creatures is very good. Especially if you can get her passive off beforehand by duplicating an instant or sorcery. We're opening some good commanders. Kenrith, the Returned King, for 4 and a white. He is a 5 power, 5 toughness, legendary creature, human noble. This is the Throne of Eldraine showcase frame. But because you would automatically look at this card and go, well, it's a white card, so you can only play white spells. No, because the abilities in its rules text have a red symbol, a green symbol, a white symbol, a blue symbol, and a black symbol, making the colour identity of this card all 5 colours. Meaning that if this is your commander, your deck can have all the cards. But what Kenrith does is for red, all creatures gain trample and haste until end of turn. For 1 and a green, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. For 2 and a white, target player gains 5 life. For 3 and a blue, target player draws a card. And for 4 and a black, put target creature from a graveyard onto the battlefield under its owner's control. So you can play this as a hug commander by targeting your opponent's stuff for a bunch of these and giving your opponents trample and haste in their turn. Or you can use it on your own stuff, which with training grounds would make it a red, a green, a white, 1 and a blue, 2 and a black, which is disgusting. Kenrith is a very good card, especially as we can then play a Traxxas in our Kenrith deck, and all the +1/+1 counters that we put on get proliferated. This is very mean. I'm opening some very mean cards that I could build, and I'm not sure if I want to or not. Okay, we've got a common wild card, flashback, pretty good, some scrying, some delirium, which I mentioned before, because this is Shadows over Innistrad remastered. Ooh, we've got a spider spawning, which has flashback and makes a bunch of spiders equal to the number of cards in your graveyard. Creature cards, notably. We've got a Voldaran Pariah. For 3 black. They are a 3/3 creature vampire horror with flying, and you sacrifice 3 creatures to transform them into the Abolisher of Bloodlines, which is a 6/5 flying Eldrazi vampire. And when this creature transforms into Abolisher of Bloodlines, target opponent sacrifices 3 creatures of their choice. So you sacrifice 3 creatures to flip it over and make them sacrifice 3 creatures. It also has the Madness mechanic, which is if you would discard it, you instead exile it and can cast it for its Madness cost, or put it back into your graveyard. And its Madness cost is black. So if you're in a mono black draw cards, discard cards deck, you can discard this card, spend 3 black, put it down to the battlefield, and then flip it over at some point. We have the Sin Prodder for 2 and a red. It is a 3/2 creature devil. It has Menace. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you reveal the top card of your library. Any opponent may have you put that card into your graveyard. If they do, Sin Prodder hits them for the mana value of that card. Otherwise, you put it into your hand. So in the Atali Big Red Things deck, Sin Prodder would be very good to get out early. Because then at the beginning of your upkeep, you just go, I flip over the top card. Look at all this. Look at how big and high the mana value is on this red card. Do you want to take 6, 7, whatever it might be? Or can I draw this card? We then also have Confirmed Suspicions, which I think we saw before. For 3 blue, it is instant, counter-target spell, which works well in the Boral deck if we want to build that. And then you investigate 3 times, which means you make 3 clue tokens. Then we've got, okay, I think this is the last non-alchemy set of packs. So I can open this, read these, and then go on break. Because I've overshot my break by quite a lot. We've got a couple of spells, a couple of lands, notably land with the subtype Sphere. There's a couple of things that care about spheres in this. Basically, they're the common land cycle that enter tapped. They add the colour, or you can sacrifice them and spend a bit of mana to draw a card. Toxic, which I forgot was in this format, plays with the poison counters that I mentioned for Infect. A creature with Toxic either deals damage as... deals damage as normal, but also gives the player that many poison counters if it hits a player. We've got another creature with Toxic. A creature that makes Might tokens, a common wild card. An equipment with 4 Mirrodin, which works the same as the other equipment cards we've seen before, like the Saddle and the Phyrexian Helmet, the living weapons. Except it makes a 2/2 red rebel, and then equips automatically. We've got another Sphere. A creature that cares about oil counters. So whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on Ica Synthesizer. And as long as the Ica Synthesizer has 4 or more oil counters on it, it gets +2/+0 and can't be blocked. We then have an uncommon wild card. An artifact, Tammy's Logbook, that draws me cards and costs less if you have a bunch of artifacts. Another card that cares about having a bunch of artifacts. And then our rares. Kethic, Crucible Goliath, for 2 black red. It is a 4/4 legendary creature Phyrexian Beast. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-legendary creature card with lesser mana value. Put it onto the battlefield, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's an aristocrat style deck, because at the beginning of your end step you sacrifice a creature, but also it just cares about revealing little non-legendary creatures. The other top card I like. Yeah. We then have the Mercurial Spell Dancer, who I believe also cares about oil counters. Yeah. So for 1 and a blue, it is a 2/1 Phyrexian Rogue. It can't be blocked. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may remove 2 oil counters from it. If you do, the next instant or sorcery spell you cast, you copy it, and can choose new targets for the copy. We also have a card here that has affinity for artifacts. So the affinity mechanic works by making a spell cost cheaper for the number of things you have that trigger the affinity. So for instance, affinity for artifacts is this spell costs 1 less for the number of artifacts you control. Our last rare is a rare land, Blackcleave Cliffs. Enters tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands. So it's a fast land, and then it taps for black or red. Whew. Okay. There we go. That took a lot, but we've gone through all of the non-alchemy packs.